In the early 2000s, the United States intelligence community faced a catastrophic operational failure, a multi-billion-dollar flood of fragmented data that hid lethal threats in plain sight. Imagine a soldier crouched in the dirt, surrounded by a million scattered clues, radio intercepts, encrypted messages, blurry drone footage, but completely blind to the bomb waiting around the next corner. The information to save lives existed, but it was buried deep inside disconnected, outdated computer systems that refused to talk to each other. This was the ultimate strategic crisis, a blind spot that left operators on the ground entirely defenseless against unseen attacks because the technology they bought simply did not work. Every second wasted trying to piece together this digital puzzle was a matter of life and death. Analysts were drowning in a chaotic sea of spreadsheets, desperately trying to connect a suspicious bank transfer in London to a burner phone moving through the mountains of Afghanistan. The sheer volume of raw noise was paralyzing, creating a brutal reality where the right answer arrived hours after the tragedy had already happened. The world did not need another weapon. It desperately needed a way to see through the suffocating fog of its own information. To solve this impossible puzzle, a secretive company took on a single urgent mission: keeping people safe by turning chaos into clarity. They built a system called Palantir Gotham, designed specifically for the high-stakes world of government intelligence. Think of the classic detective movie trope where an investigator stares at a giant, messy corkboard, using red string to connect pictures of bad guys, license plates, and secret hideouts. Gotham is exactly that, but built inside a massive, lightning-fast computer that can read billions of clues in the blink of an eye. Instead of a human detective spending years pinning up photos, the system instantly weaves all those scattered puzzle pieces together to reveal the hidden network of a terrorist cell or a human trafficking ring. It takes the messy, tangled web of raw information and translates it into a clear, visual map that anyone can understand. For the first time, intelligence officers could actually see the invisible relationships between a seemingly random address, a suspicious vehicle, and a known threat. This was not just a software update, it was a radical new way of hunting in the dark. Behind this revolutionary tool was Alex Karp, a deeply unconventional leader who waged a lonely war against the entire culture of Silicon Valley. While his peers were chasing quick fortunes by building addictive social media apps and selling consumer data to advertisers, Karp looked in the exact opposite direction. He was an outsider, a philosopher by training, who viewed the tech industry's obsession with trivial conveniences as a profound moral failure. He refused to play by the easy rules of venture capital, choosing instead to build complex, unglamorous technology for the grueling realities of national defense. This absolute refusal to conform made Karp an outcast in his own industry. Investors laughed him out of the room, completely unable to understand why anyone would spend millions developing software for government agencies that were famously slow to buy anything new. He faced intense isolation and brutal skepticism, bleeding cash for years while the rest of the tech world celebrated overnight billionaires. But Karp was driven by a stubborn, unyielding conviction that software should protect human life, not just harvest human attention. That stubborn defiance eventually shattered the government's reliance on broken legacy systems, transforming his struggling startup into an indispensable backbone of Western intelligence. The impact of that victory extends far beyond classified military bunkers, reaching directly into the quiet, ordinary moments of your own life. When you walk down a crowded city street, board a commercial flight, or simply trust that your local power grid will keep the lights on, you are walking beneath an invisible shield. The same technology built to hunt insurgents in a war zone is silently working in the background to track global supply chains, monitor financial fraud, and predict catastrophic failures before they happen. It is a profound, almost unsettling realization that our daily safety relies on a constant, hidden battle against chaos. You never see the disaster that was prevented, the terror plot that was quietly dismantled, or the critical medicine that arrived exactly on time because a digital map predicted the delay. We live our lives in a state of fragile peace, completely unaware of the massive, tangled web of data being untangled every single second to keep the modern world from collapsing in on itself. The secret to making this invisible shield work is not just cold code. It relies on a unique breed of problem solvers known as forward-deployed engineers. Instead of sitting comfortably in a shiny California office writing software from afar, These engineers are sent directly into the dirt alongside the people using their tools. They are the medics and cornermen in the boxing ring of crisis, embedding themselves in military bases, disaster zones, and factory floors to understand the raw, bleeding edge of the problem. The secret behind their success is not just a piece of code sitting on a server somewhere. It is a unique group of people known as forward-deployed engineers. Instead of staying safely inside a comfortable office building in Silicon Valley, these engineers pack their bags and travel directly to the front lines. They act like combat medics or boxing cornermen standing shoulder to shoulder with soldiers in war zones or disaster relief workers in the rubble. They do not just hand over a software manual and walk away. They live in the dirt and the chaos, building the tools right there in the trenches while the crisis is actively unfolding around them. By writing code under the deafening roar of military helicopters or inside freezing command tents, they forge a system born from actual survival rather than classroom theory. But this operational secret carries a massive, unseen human cost. Imagine being a young engineer, suddenly burdened with the crushing weight of a whole nation's safety or a hospital's crumbling supply line. The pressure is absolute and unforgiving. They are not just fixing computer bugs to make a website load faster. They are staring at screens where a single delayed response or a missed connection could mean an ambush on a patrol or a critical shortage of medicine during a pandemic. The long, sleepless nights stretch into weeks of relentless anxiety. These engineers carry the ghosts of the field back home with them, fully aware that their keystrokes dictate who lives and who dies. It is a level of mental grit that breaks many, turning the act of data analysis into a grueling test of human endurance. They are forced to grow up instantly, trading the carefree life of a typical tech worker for the grim reality of global crisis management. Eventually, the battleground shifted from the literal trenches to a new, massive arena of global business. The same invisible threats that haunted battlefields were silently tearing apart the world's biggest companies. Supply chains were breaking, factories were stalling, and massive airlines were bleeding money without knowing why. To fight this new kind of chaos, the company built a second weapon, naming it Palantir Foundry. If their first creation was a high-tech radar designed specifically for hunting down bad guys, this new system was something entirely different. Think of Palantir Foundry as the ultimate master control room for a giant, sprawling factory. It was built to look at every single moving part of a massive corporation, from the raw materials on a cargo ship to the final product on a store shelf, and make sense of the overwhelming noise. This master control room allowed struggling corporate giants to finally see the hidden bottlenecks that were quietly suffocating their businesses. Yet, this pivot to the corporate world reveals a fascinating human mystery. Giant, intensely proud companies are notoriously paranoid, guarding their internal data like gold in a vault. Handing over decades of deeply kept secrets, customer records, and financial failures to an outside tech company goes against every instinct of self-preservation. It is exactly like letting a complete stranger wire themselves directly into your brain, giving them full access to every thought and memory you have ever had. Taking that step requires an immense, almost terrifying leap of human trust. These corporate leaders are not just buying a piece of software, they are surrendering their vulnerability. They are allowing an outsider to become their central nervous system, trusting that this new partner will protect them rather than exploit their deepest weaknesses. It is a desperate act of faith, born from the realization that they can no longer survive the modern world alone. To honor that profound trust, the engineers must perform a brutal, exhausting task known as data integration. This is not a clean, automatic process that happens with the push of a button. Imagine a giant, tangled fishing net the size of a city, made of 1,000,000 knotted ropes. Each knot represents a messy, confusing piece of information, like an old sales receipt, a handwritten maintenance log, or a broken sensor reading. Imagine standing before a giant, tangled fishing net made of 1,000,000 knotted ropes. Every rope is a different piece of messy, confusing information from a different part of a massive organization. One rope is a factory floor schedule, another is a shipping manifest, and another is a frantic email from a supplier. Palantir does not just look at the net and guess. Their engineers dive into that massive, greasy knot with their bare hands, pulling and tracing every single thread until the chaos finally straightens out into a clear, single picture of reality. Once that massive knot is finally untangled, the blindfolds come off. Companies that spent decades stumbling in the dark suddenly see exactly where their money is bleeding out, where their supply chains are breaking, and exactly how to stop the bleeding before it destroys them. It is easy to look at Palantir today and see only a pristine, multi-billion-dollar empire. But you have to strip away that shiny label to see the scarred hands that actually built it. This level of dominance was never won with smooth boardroom talk, clever marketing tricks, or flashy advertisements. It was won by stepping directly into the ring with their clients and taking the absolute hardest hits alongside them. When a massive global manufacturer faced total collapse during a crisis, Palantir engineers did not just send a software manual and walk away. They moved in, slept under desks, and absorbed the brutal, crushing pressure of saving a dying business as if their own lives depended on it. But carrying that much weight comes with a painful, isolating backlash. When you hold the master keys to so many deep, dark operational secrets, people naturally become terrified of what you might do in the shadows. The outside world looked at the immense power Palantir wielded and saw a terrifying, all-seeing eye. The streets outside their offices filled with protests, fueled by the deep fear that this company was building a massive, uncontrollable Big Brother surveillance machine. For the engineers inside, who believed they were simply trying to stop terrorist attacks and fix broken supply chains, the heavy burden of being entirely misunderstood felt like a constant, suffocating weight. That suffocating fear forced the company to build an ironclad culture of secrecy, turning inward to survive the public storm. They stopped trying to explain themselves to a world that refused to listen, choosing instead to let their survival rate on the absolute darkest battlefields do all the talking. That same quiet survival instinct is what drives their entire strategy with artificial intelligence today. Forget the science fiction movies where a robot takes over the world. Palantir treats AI as nothing more than a superpowered spotlight designed to cut straight through the blinding, chaotic fog of war. When a commander is trapped in a combat zone, or a hospital director is overwhelmed by a sudden pandemic, the panic makes it impossible to see the right move. Palantir uses AI to instantly scan millions of data points and hand that terrified human leader a perfect, brightly lit map of the battlefield. It does not replace the human fighter, but it guarantees they never have to swing blindly in the dark again. This reveals the most deeply human aspect of their entire artificial intelligence strategy. No matter how fast the computer gets or how incredibly smart the machine becomes, Palantir operates on the absolute belief that the human heart must remain in total control. The algorithm can calculate the odds, trace the enemy's path, and predict the failure of a supply chain, but it cannot understand the value of a human life. Palantir's engineers built their systems on a singular, unyielding belief that the machine must never make the final call. There must always be a human heartbeat at the center of the screen, a person bearing the heavy moral weight of pulling the trigger or halting a shipment, ensuring that artificial intelligence serves the human conscience rather than replacing it. You can see this tension inside the quiet, secure rooms of the Pentagon in 2023, where operators stare at glowing Palantir dashboards tracking live global conflicts. The software highlights a target in stark red, processing millions of data points in a fraction of a second, but the room remains perfectly still. The system is waiting, suspended in that heavy, silent space between a digital recommendation and a human command, forcing commanders to confront the terrifying reality that the ultimate burden of survival still rests entirely on their shoulders. This deep integration reveals the true engine behind their massive government and corporate contracts. Palantir does not simply sell a software subscription and walk away to count their profits. They sell survival in the darkest hours of a crisis. When a catastrophic failure threatens to collapse a hospital system, or an invisible enemy closes in on a military platoon, Palantir's engineers drop into the trenches alongside them, writing code while the crisis rages right outside the door. Once you have stood shoulder to shoulder with a client in the mud and pulled them back from the edge of disaster, the relationship permanently changes. They stop being a vendor and become an extension of the client's own family. This forged-in-fire trust is the ultimate operational secret of their multi-billion-dollar empire, creating a bond so deep and reliant that ripping Palantir out of an organization would be like tearing out its very nervous system. Yet, with that total reliance comes a sheer, terrifying weight. Palantir has quietly evolved from a scrappy startup into the hidden pillars, literally holding up the sky. Their code now silently manages the intricate flow of global food supplies, dictates the distribution of life-saving medical gear, and acts as the central nervous system for Allied military defenses across multiple continents. If their servers go dark, or if a single line of their artificial intelligence code hallucinates at the wrong moment, the consequences are not measured in lost revenue, but in lost lives. The engineers who built these tools carry the crushing daily realization that a single mistake could blind an army, starve a city, or crash a national power grid. They are holding up a digital world that cannot afford to slip for even a second. This unprecedented level of control inevitably forced a permanent shift in how modern governments regulate digital power. By the time international data privacy laws were being rewritten, Palantir's deep integration into state security had already set a new, unmovable baseline. Lawmakers suddenly found themselves scrambling to draft legislation for a world where private corporate algorithms were already deeply entangled with national defense strategies, fundamentally altering the legal boundaries between a tech company and the state. The durable consequence of this era is a permanent blurring of the lines between commercial enterprise and sovereign power. Entire nations now realize they cannot defend their borders or sustain their economies without leaning on the proprietary intelligence of a single, private entity. The global power structure has been quietly rewired, placing unprecedented geopolitical influence into the hands of a few engineers working quietly behind locked doors. For the communities and ordinary citizens caught in this invisible web, the aftermath is a lingering, quiet unease. Factory workers, hospital patients, and families going about their daily routines are largely unaware that their movements, their needs, and their safety are being constantly calculated by an unseen intelligence. They are living in a world optimized by an invisible shield, protected from chaos but permanently tethered to a machine they will never fully comprehend. For the hospital administrators, logistics workers, and military commanders operating within these interconnected systems, the daily reality of their work has been irrevocably altered. When a sudden supply chain collapse threatens to delay critical medical equipment, the human cost is immediately measured in postponed surgeries and frightened families. The software does not feel this anxiety, but it processes the variables, rerouting freight and reallocating resources in real time to prevent the shortfall. The aftermath for the people on the ground is a profound shift in how they carry the weight of their roles, trading the paralyzing fear of blind spots for the heavy responsibility of executing decisions dictated by an all-seeing algorithmic engine. This reliance on a central intelligence fabric creates a powerful aftershock across the broader landscape of global business and defense. The fundamental assumption that large institutions must operate in disconnected silos was permanently shattered by the Department of Defense in 2023, when they expanded their commitment to Palantir with a massive new contract for the artificial intelligence platform. The realization was clear, proving that survival in the modern era no longer depends on who has the most data, but on who can synthesize and act on it the fastest. Entire industries are now forced to recognize that the old methods of fragmented analysis are a critical vulnerability, sparking an arms race to integrate predictive models into the very foundation of their operations. The aftershock of this invisible empire became undeniable in 2023 when Palantir achieved its first fully profitable year and launched its artificial intelligence platform to overwhelming demand. A fundamental assumption of the modern era shattered in that moment. For decades, the public and the markets believed that Silicon Valley tech culture and gritty national defense were entirely separate worlds, destined to remain at odds. Palantir proved that assumption dangerously obsolete. By synthesizing the raw, chaotic data of battlefields and global supply chains into a single source of truth, they forced a worldwide realization. Software is no longer just a commercial tool for corporate efficiency. It is the absolute, unyielding foundation of geopolitical survival, dictating which institutions will endure the coming decades and which will be swept away by their own blind spots. The chaos of the world has not vanished, but the way humanity faces it has fundamentally changed. Somewhere right now, far from the public eye, a young forward-deployed engineer sits in a quiet, dimly lit command center. They are not firing a weapon or moving physical cargo. But as they watch a unified, living map of reality pulse across a glowing screen, they are holding the line. They are the human mind inside the machine, standing between the fragile systems of our daily lives and the unforgiving dark.